Allahu Akbar.
Let me begin by saying I'm most happy to be here with you today. And I want to thank Naeem Beg and the others who invited me to come and speak to you. I should note that in focusing on civil liberty, I'll talk mostly about religious freedom. I hope you heard that announcement. It sounds pretty important to me. In speaking of social justice, I'm going to focus on the common good of society. I think our considerations today have great practical importance, as has already been mentioned. There are trends in our society today, for example, that will restrict our religious liberty. Now, this is not just true in the ongoing debate between the Catholic Church and the national government. Local government fees on buildings of religious communities, for example, buildings that are not used for worship, such as your social hall, are being considered in places for special charges. Or perhaps what might be happening in your community is a change in zoning restrictions, a change in the communal activities that are permitted in your space. Proposed restrictions on civil liberties, as we know, can be local or specific to a city or a county. Just this past Friday, I was talking to a priest in whose city these types of restrictions are being considered. Let me say a little bit about the pursuit of happiness, our topic for this conference. Catholic social teaching stresses the inherent dignity of the human person. We call for full respect and for love for each person. This respect expresses itself in the rights of people to food, water, safety, housing, healthcare, involvement in public life, and affiliation in groups that promote well-being, such as labor unions or civic groups. Our teaching has implications for the common good. As a Catholic author put it recently, the human person is created in God's image. There is a distinctive hallmark that is of conforming the person's actions to the truth which he does not create but discovers in his own nature, a rationale received with our own being. Thus, we look both to revelation from God and reflection on our own being as made by God as we seek happiness and the fulfillment of our humanity. Jean Vanier, a Canadian former military officer and the founder of L'Arche communities that do specialized work with disabled people, he puts it well when he says this: "Is this not the life undertaking of all of us, to become human? It can be a long and sometimes painful process. It involves a growth to freedom, an opening up of our hearts to other people, no longer hiding behind masks or behind the walls of fear or prejudice. It means discovering our common humanity." If we reflect a little bit on civil liberties, we might say this: I would like to focus on religious liberty, especially since it's very important to all who are gathered here. I begin with these observations. Religious liberty in Catholic thinking is both international and national. We're working for religious freedom around the globe. We believe that religious freedom is at the center of all the other civil liberties, and if religious freedom goes down or is limited, the others will be too. Secondly, we're always engaged in the search for the truth. The truth as God has given to us and the truth of our own human nature given by God. Thus, we are interested in what we call natural law, as Muslim thinkers have been as well. And we are concerned that we understand our being very well so that we can offer arguments in the public square, in civil discourse, based on the nature that we all share. Thirdly, Catholic thinking tends to stress relationships and community. We have a deep commitment to the common good, and we are somewhat in contrast with those who stress the individual more than the community. Fourthly, the practice of religious freedom in the United States has influenced Catholic teaching. Our change in our teaching in the 1960s relates very much to the experience in this country. It took a long time for that experience to get out to the entire church, but it has occurred. In his recent book, Ross DeThot of the New York Times, his book, Bad Religion, he says that Catholic thinking had its impact after World War II and then made its way into the Vatican Ecumenical Council. You'll find this thinking in the Declaration on Religious Liberty, which the 2,000 bishops assembled from throughout the world adopted in 1965. What are some key elements of this document? They say this: the right to religious freedom is based in the very dignity of the human person, as known through the revealed Word of God and through reason itself. Secondly, to deny the human person free exercise of religion in society when the just requirements of public order are observed is to do an injustice to the human person and to the very order established by God. In exercising their rights, individual men and women and social groups are bound by the moral law to have regard for the rights of others, for their own duties. A word I would interject we don't hear that much anymore: duty. What are we obliged to do for others? It's not just our rights, it's our responsibilities to the whole community. All people are to be treated, the council bishops say, with justice and with great humanity. Freedom should be given the fullest possible recognition and should not be curtailed except when it is insofar as it is necessary. And finally, I would quote, the Church also claims freedom for herself as a society of men and women with the right to live in civil society in accordance with the demands of the Christian faith. We would say, of course, this applies to Muslim faith as well. Well, I can just summarize this in a few words because of the lack of time. I certainly think that you can catch the direction that for us, religious liberty is extremely important. The current debate is about efforts to change the definition of religious liberty and to limit it. A further discussion arises about these limits. Are there limits, and what are they? The Declaration mentions the exercise of the right to religious liberty cannot be interfered with as long as the just requirements of public order are observed. What I can say is would interpret this sentence of the Declaration is that religious liberty should be given preference. Yes, we have to maintain civil order, but preference should be towards freedom and not toward limitation. There were previous accommodations made by the government to our religious liberty which were quite broad. The debate is about efforts to limit us further. The common good is a major aspect of Catholic social teaching. The Declaration says this: the common good of society consists in the sum total of those conditions of social life which enable men and women to achieve a fuller measure of perfection with greater ease, consists especially in safeguarding the rights and duties of the human person. We are communal people. We live together. As I've seen in my day here with you, families gathered together. What a wonderful thing to see. We are community people. We're meant to be together. We need public services and rights of association in group. The government is to serve the common good of everyone. Finally, let me say, my final topic is education. Education causes us to realize the fullness of our humanity. This is a developmental process. Thus, it takes place over time. Education can be as formal as in schools or universities, or can be informal as learning something from our father or our mother. Much of our education is by example. We learn from our parents and other important figures in our lives. I notice this every time I visit my mother in Philadelphia. I'm like her, not just by genetics, but because I learned so much from her when I was a child, but when I was an adult also. She has a certain gentle way about her. Education, secondly, is a series of encounters with others. It brings us to the fullness of our humanity. This takes place in schools, but it also is in doing projects. I also think it took place in the concert that was in here for children before we came in. It's a formative influence. These events make a difference. They need to be encouraged. Thirdly, a complete education involves participation in the broader community, not just in the Catholic community or the Muslim community, but in the total community. Today, a problem is that people are moving into isolated communities, gated communities, where people like each other live together and limit their view of the world. This is an ongoing problem. Real education in humanity, personal and spiritual growth, comes because we engage in relationships with some people not like us. Fourthly, education requires a commitment on the part of individuals and the community. It takes place over time. Really, we never stop learning. This is one of the reasons I'm present here with you, to learn from you, to learn from my fellow panelists and from the members of the community I've talked to in presentations and also in the line for coffee. We have much to learn, continue to learn from one another. Finally, I would say this. Jean Vanier, who spent the second part of his life working with handicapped, disabled people, says this: human maturity comes as we bring our heads and our hearts together. Education is for the whole person. In dealing with his feelings about people with disabilities, at the beginning, he was very fearful and nervous. He became more mature. And I think that's part of education. We learn from one another. Perhaps we're uncomfortable in the beginning. We have to get over our fears and our preconceptions, the social things we've learned, and dig more deeply into relationships. So let me say today I've given you a brief overview of a little bit of Catholic teaching, but let us urge us to continue to become friends with one another, and thus to advance the cause of justice and love in our country. Thank you very much.